Hi, so I'm Heather Schlegel and I'm a futurist, and I study trends and behavior that people are doing today to understand what the future could be. And I've been primarily researching the future of transactions and money for the past 4 years and looking at how technology is disrupting our financial and economic systems. Around this space, I have been researching the future of money, and my current project is to create a TV series on the future of money. Well, I definitely see a connection between science fiction and future studies. And this is because with science fiction, you have the creativity to think about what the future could be. It's not so much an exploration of the future, but it's more an exploration of what values and technology is available today without the constraints that we have of our everyday world or the reality. What a futurist does is they are limited to the constraints of what really can happen. It's not just what we can imagine, it's what we can produce with technology or raw materials or just from a values perspective where we are societically today. I'm looking at the camera and I can see a lot of them in the back. This bookshelf here has a lot of my favorite science fiction. My favorite one, this is absolutely my favorite one, is this book. It's by science fiction author Samuel Delany, and it's Trouble on Triton. And it was written in the 60s, and it's actually really surprisingly valid today. I, of course, love P.K. Dick. You can probably see some of his stuff up there, too. Ian MacDonald. And one of my favorite science fiction authors, and also my friend, is Ramez Nam. And he had two phenomenal books come out last year, Nexus and Crux. So I've made 3 short scenario films about the future of money, the future of transactions, actually. And the first one is Fly Me to the Moon, and it's probably my favorite one. And it was the first one, so if you go look for it now, you're going to look at it and then say, hey, we've already got some of that stuff, and it's true. It was written and shot in 2010 and 2011, so it's aged a bit. But it shows 4 friends having dinner or having lunch, and then they split the bill. And it shows new ways, new technologies and transactions, and even a new way that the bill is provided that allows them to pay for things different ways, like with a mobile phone or with a secure transaction coin that was based off of Bitcoin, with a credit card. And then my favorite was this idea of blue orbit credits. And in the scenario, it's a space captain who has these corporate currency that the waiter is collecting to collect a suborbit space flight. And so the waiter is collecting these different points, which kind of you can think about, they're like frequent flyer miles. Once he gets so many, he'll be able to redeem them for a suborbit space flight. And it shows the ability for people to choose how they want to receive compensation. And I think this choice is really important, and we're going to be able to see more of that in the future. As far as examples of currency in other movies, most of the currencies that I've noticed in other movies are really dystopian. There was a movie where time was a currency, and that if you didn't keep pumping up your time, you would die, and you had to work to get time, or you could gift your time to other people. But then people in a certain elitist, rich bracket, they never ran out of time, and so they always had so much time. I love the movie Inception, and when I first saw it, I was just blown away. And the thing that blew me away the most about Inception was for the first time in a really long time, it was a fabulous Hollywood action film, but it had a positive underlying story. There was a lot of conflict, and if you think about what they were doing, they were really manipulating what people think. Instead of manipulating, having that manipulation be like a negative experience or breaking down of the character, it actually gave a sense of catharsis and made the character find wholeness in the relationship he had with his father. The two most interesting things that were in Inception that are actually happening today are this ability to architect our worlds, our virtual worlds. And if you look at what people are doing in Second Life and in Minecraft, people are able to create these fantastic, amazing worlds virtually that you can go in and interface and interact with. So we're going to see more of that. The other thing that I think is really interesting is this ability to connect with people on, well, in Inception, they're connecting in the dream world. But I actually did some research over the summer on the future of relationships and intimacy, where we extrapolated out to 2050, and our idea was that in 2050 you would have a kind of like invasive tattoo that you put on your arm or on your hand, and this would interface with your nervous system and your chemicals and biological chemical signals, and it would allow you to either broadcast broadly or narrowcast and share with a small group of people your emotional states. Suppose you could potentially do this during a sleeping state, and one of the things we thought was so interesting about sharing each other's emotional states was this understanding that you might have of another person. And I think that also humans will be able to better interface with other humans and understand people who have different value sets, who live different kinds of lives, who have different beliefs, and this could possibly increase tolerance and compassion within the human race. We might have a better understanding of not just interfacing with other humans, but interfacing with our machines, our devices, and even robots. And even as we take this idea to be able to interface with these machines, we can potentially understand our own software programming to be able to, I'm not quite sure how to say this, have the machines and the robots have a better understanding of how our human brains work, to have more of a hybrid between a human and machine. I don't believe in a future where we have robot overlords. I think the thing that is missing with the current research and the people looking at singularity is this understanding of our human brains, and not just from the hardware of, like, you know, how the brain function works, but how we parse the world and perceive what we perceive and why we perceive what we perceive. And this has to do with belief systems and culture. The thing that I think is probably the most ridiculous would be when they went down so many levels to the subconscious level and they got lost and trapped down there. That seems, again, great for plot and conflict and story, really wonderful. But are we really gonna get trapped in our brains and never be able to come back out into this reality? That seems a little bit hard. Or I can see both ways, that no, there's no way we could really get trapped into these lowest levels of subconscious dream worlds. But then I also see that people get trapped into dream worlds and fantasies just in everyday life. I think it's very scary to try to predict anything. And part of this is because I really want to believe in free will. And if you predict something, even with behavioral economics, or there's even devices, there's apps that you can put on your phone that will predict what you're going to text to your friends based on your past. That says to me that if something is able to predict you, then you don't necessarily have free will. The more we know about individuals and our brains, you will be able to predict behavioral patterns. But I also want to believe, and there are times when people change these and they don't act in predictable ways. So I think that even if you're able to predict things, one cannot rely on those predictions 100% of the time. Well, I do, you can lucid dream. I have lucid dreamt, so I know that that's possible. I've also had dreams within dreams within dreams, and I know that's possible, and I've had some pretty crazy dreams. Um, so I do think you can manipulate dreams. I think that it takes a lot of skill and practice. The dream state is again something I don't think we fully understand, and there are some spiritual texts that talk about doing certain spiritual or religious activities or techniques or practices, dreaming practices. And so I think about dreams as, yes, it's something you have at night, and you can sleep and you can do lucid dreaming and dream within dreams. And Waking Life is a great movie that kind of explores that. One called the fugue system, which was when you spend money, it spawns a copy of itself that goes into this kind of like free space. And that copy could be collected through mining. And then once that copy was spent, then it would spawn another copy. And when I say that the money was spent, I don't necessarily mean the money disappears. It means that, hey, I've got this dollar and I'm giving it to you and you're giving me a cup of coffee. And so you've got the dollar now, but once the transaction occurs, it makes a copy of it that goes somewhere else that, say, someone else mines and then uses it. So this is this idea of an abundant currency, and it was really based on the idea of social capital, a transaction where each transaction increases the currency in circulation. A self-conscious currency. So in this example, you could say, hey, I want to go on a diet, so I'm going to use the self-conscious currency that only allows me to eat or to buy food that's going to be healthy and nourishing to my body. And so that's, I've chosen this currency that has this constraint to kind of keep me on track. But if you take this idea of a self-conscious currency and say you're using a currency that mapped with your political belief sets, and then say over the course of time your belief sets changed and you were no longer in line with the belief sets of the currency. And so the currency actually says, hey, you're no longer in line with the values that I represent, so you can't use me. But that doesn't mean the currency goes away. It just means that, hey, I'll be something different.